בוקר אור. אני בסדר גמור, אני כאן, זה עונה 64 שאני כאן במחנה בכל שנה. 64. אני גילי זה יותר מ-64, כמעט 74.
אני ואתה, כמעט אותו דבר.
בערך.
רגע, 64 איזה מה הייתה השנה הראשונה שהיית?
שהייתי במחנה כחניך 51. הייתי כאן בשנת 50, הייתי בן 10 והיה צריך להיות בן 11 בשנים האלו להיות חניך. אז ב-50 הייתי במחנה פלמבו, שזה קרוב, זה באיגל ריבר, שיחקנו כדור בסיס בין מחנות, אז באתי כאן וראיתי את המחנה, כבר ידעתי מחנה רמה, זה היה מאוד מעניין, כיוון שלא היו להם מים, היה, מה קוראים? פומפ, אבל צריכים לעשות בכוח, אז היה שם, זה היה על יד החדר אוכל עכשיו, אבל זה היה, מאוד פרימיטיבי, כן? לא היו לנו חשמל, אפילו כשהייתי כאן ב-51, עשינו החשמל בעצמנו. המכונה, היה לנו ג'נרטור, מכונה בשם אונן. אלו שמכירים את התנ"ך, יודעים למה זה אונן. ועשינו חשמל לעצמנו. לא היה חשמל. לא היה רק קו אחד לטלפון, right? עם מגנטו היה במשרד, איך אומרים מגנטו? אתה צריך להיות כך, את המגנט, כן, ואז מקבלים חשמל, ואז מישהי אומרת, כן, מה אתה רוצה, או operator, וזה היה party line. כל אחד באגם בקטבן היה על קו אחד, והמספר של הטלפון היה 424 F12. מה זה 12? זה היה 1 ארוך, 2 קצר. שאם הם רוצים לצלצל אליך, או למחנה, זה היה רינג, ואז אתה צריך להרים את מה קורה לזה? בטלפון.
זה מצחיק. You always talk about the lack of Wi-Fi around camp.
כן.
And how far behind we are when it comes
כן.
to technology. But then during a story like that,
כן. כשהייתי חבר בצוות בשנת 57, לא היה וי-פיי, אבל אני הבאתי היי-פיי. ההיי-פיי שלי מהמכללה עם תקליטים, הבאתי את הכל למחנה, וזה היה בחדר שלי. למה זה חשוב? שב-58 נתתי רשות לחניכה אחד להיכנס לחדרי, לשמוע תקליטים, אם אני לא נמצא שם. היא הייתה חניכה ואני, או מי היה החניכה הזאת, זה עכשיו אשתי. Yeah. So you now see something that is very interesting about the ancient past. Remember, Ramah, Wisconsin, Ramah was begun in 1947. There was no state of Israel. 48, 49, 50, 51, our connections with Israel were emotional, were by newspaper and radio and things, but you didn't have mishlachat, you did not have, there was no seminar to Israel or anything like that. So what was our kesher, what was our connection to Israel? Dibur Ivrit. And so in that period, I mean, the story is that you learned on the train to camp. You didn't have to take a bus. On the train to camp, Nala Havir Chemat Batnim. Bring this, pass the peanut butter. And if you could say Chemat Batnim, the riba, you were pretty good. You'd be able to survive the summer on peanut butter and jelly.
I still use that trick in Israel all the time. I ask people if I'm between riba.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm 6'4". That's how I got to do that. You talked about Hebrew, and I read an article, and now you might approve or not. I read an article about it dealt with the Hebrew in North America, among North American Jews. It said something about North American Jews trying to build like this new Hebrew,
Right.
where we, in laughter, say, call Ivrit Ramah, just
Wasn't?
to make it more intact or to make it more manageable for younger kids.
Okay. It wasn't Ivrit Ramah, it was actually Ivrit Masad. Machane Masad. Why? Because that was the first camp devoted to Hebrew in the late 40s, before Ramah. The leaders of Masad, some of them became the founders of Ramah, and they published Milon Masad, and it tried to do, one better than Ben Yehuda, right? It created words. And so you had a book that said, if you want to speak Hebrew, this is where you go. It's years later that we began to develop our own vocabulary. And then, of course, once you have an ongoing connection with Israel, it's much different. Then you begin to pick up. But there are still some Israelis who learn some of our words. A bit.
I've got to say, Chanutiya
Right.
is a word that I learned here, and I use it constantly in Israel.
Right, but there are very few small stores left. I mean, that's we used to use Chanutiya in the United States. It was the store that was right around the corner from our home. But now you have Walmart and Target, and no one calls them.
I'm proud to say that not only that we have Chanutiya where I come from, the village that I was born at is smaller than the average Walmart store. So this is something that I am very proud of.
That's very good. The village that we have here was also very small. At the beginning, you had 200, 225 campers. Not at the very start, we had less. But and our thought, even into the 60s, was that the camp would be for 350, 360 chanichim and 150 staff, tzavet, and that would be it. And it was only later that we realized that we had an obligation to serve a larger population. But we were a very small community. And I will tell you, sort of interesting. Tuesday night, we were at the Shiva house for Carol Gutstein, who was never a chanicha. She never went to camp. Her husband, Sal, did go to camp and was one of the original campers. And the number of campers from the late 40s, early 50s that were there that night for the minyan was dazzling, absolutely dazzling. And some of them will be here, like Mike Newberger will be here next week. It was a very small community, and people still relate to each other.
The choice to build a camp in a place so different. Is that, what is it?
Okay. You start this way. Eagle River, Vilas County, was one of the two largest concentrations of summer camps in the United States. Period.
Wow.
Okay? So remember that right after World War II, and also because you had concerns about polio and getting away from the city, you had summer camps all over. Number two, there was then train service. There were 2 trains a day to Eagle River. So yes, it was far away, but it was very much more accessible. You didn't have to drive. Number 3, and probably the most important, you had for 8 weeks. Everyone was going to camp for 8 weeks. So the idea of detaching you from the city was no big deal. Parents came twice a summer to visit. Camp Maccabee, which was a Jewish-oriented camp, Camp Flambeau, a little less so, but also, I mean, had rabbi and had tefillot at least on Shabbat. They were in this area. Pelican Lake for Maccabee, Eagle River had Flambeau. So this was a natural place to look. But, why this camp? Because 2 Jewish court reporters, 2 brothers, the Rothbarts, in Chicago, bought this fishing village they thought it would be an investment. It was Nelson's fishing village, and they bought it. Only after a year or so, they realized it was not a very good investment for them. So they wanted to sell it, and they were connected with the conservative Jewish community, and Rabbi Ralph Simon and Lou Weiner and Maxwell Abel all said, "Oh, would you like to buy this camp?" How much? Well, they sold the camp. We had a mortgage of $35,000. I think they sold the camp for $37,500. The whole camp, as is. So now, what's your real question? Why are we here? Because it was available. Why? What do we later? Like good conservative Jews, we come up with better explanations as time goes on. So what is the explanation? The explanation that we started giving was by coming here and by staff coming here, where they could not go home on Yom Chofesh, right? And so on. It involved a commitment by staff to the work of the camp. And that's why Ramah, Wisconsin is a better camp, always has been a better camp than Ramah, Berkshire's, where the staff used to go home on their day off so their mother would do laundry for them. Lemashal.
Yeah, without taking anything away from Berkshire's.
Yeah, they're a good camp, but I always used to. There's a particular individual for whom I would utzim all the time about he could do that.
Yeah. Although I'm returning Shaliach, and we have this course of study of Fidei Shluchim, and one of my best friends is currently in Berkshire's, and we have another one in California.
Correct.
And when we were talking about our days off, and we're going to Manhattan, and the other week, we're driving to LA, and I have a bench I can sit at the River.
Yeah.
Cinema.
Well, one of the things that, by the way, the Sochnut is doing, and I don't know that I know last year was only in the Southeast, in Atlanta area, was debriefing Chavrei Mishlachat after camp as to what their experiences were and what they learned and the impact of the shlichut, which I think is crucial because we're coming more and more and more to understand that shlichut is the model. And by the way, that includes commitments from people who don't live in Israel. I mean, we need shinshinim, shnat sherut, year of service, throughout the Jewish world. It is crucial to impacting on young people.
Agreed. On that note, הילד שלנו from the משלחת, שינשינים, and it is something, it is a world I can say for myself. When you get into it, it takes you, it swaps you.
Mm-hmm.
If you may.
Well, you only have to look at the Mormon Church because that's their model, and we stole it from them.
That's the one thing, to be right.
Yeah, look, if you're digging in the mountains in New York and you find some gold, who knows? I've never found it.
So we're keeping looking. I want to talk to you about, so I want us to continue with the chronological
Okay.
order. You were Chaver Tzedek who met his wife.
Right. Actually, the truth, if you go to ramamarriages.com, you'll read it. By 1958, I began working year-round. I was in college, working year-round for Ramah. So one of the things I did was to work with what was then called Leaders Training Fellowship. LTF was our more elite youth group rather than USY. And we had a kala, and I was the chaperone. I was already 19 years old. I was the chaperone. And there were overnight train to Minneapolis for this kala. The conductor comes to me and he says, we have two cars we can give you. One is 100 and one is 99. I said, well, why are you asking? You know we have 100. He says, because 99 is air conditioned and 100 is not. Okay, I learned achrayut of being chaver tzedek. We'll take the 99. That means I don't have a seat. I have to sit in the little lounge by the bathrooms. In the middle of the night come three girls. They are 15 years old. Hello. All right. After a little while, we talk. Two girls leave. One stays. You can guess who. One stays. And so what am I going to do? I'm 19 years old. There's this, oh my God. So how's your family? Her brother, Ira, was chanich. So how's your brother? Oh, fine. He's going to be bar mitzvah in another month. I said, wonderful. Is a parsha. What's the parsha? She said, well, it's Shabbat Rosh Chodesh. Ko amar Hashem, Hashemayim kisi v'haaretz hadom raglai. And for the next hour, we practiced her brother's haftarah. Okay, and that's really where we met.
Wow. You already got a blessing.
Well, that same haftarah ends ki to'alatam lo tamut v'yisham lo tichbe v'hayu diraon l'chol basar. So I'm not sure it's a blessing.
One thing you said that made me think, the names of the adults.
Mm-hmm.
How did anyone came out of that?
Okay.
You were talking about her brother was almost bar mitzvah. That means
Right.
It was about Mishafi.
No, he was in Ada. He was still in Ada Aleph. At the beginning of the camp, we had first Machaneh Machon. Okay, that's easy. We wanted to distinguish between if you were a sophomore in high school and sophomore, junior, senior, Machon. Younger, Machaneh. So then, as the camp grew, we divided, because we had to do different programming, camp divided Ada Aleph, Ada Bet. And Machon became Ada Gimel. The Aleph and Bet is pretty simple, everybody can learn that. We did not. I can't tell you the year, but it's after I was already on the camp committee. So I was already past college, past law school, and we began to have names. Why not? If you don't have a name, you can't have a song for the Edah, right? Right. So what we say, Aleph, 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 it won't work. You got to have something that'll lend itself to a song. So that didn't start until much later. How they were picked, I think really you have to ask Rav Soloff, because I think it didn't start until he was the director, which of course was several decades ago.
All right. Being a wife, being to that Simvet, you hit 1958.
58, working full time. Continue to work, Chaver Tzevet. At that time, I was, how did we say it? I was assistant to the director. I could not be assistant director because, first of all, I was not going either to become a Jewish educator or a rabbi. So, I'm assistant to the director through to 1963. So 57 and part of 50 and 58, I was also Rosh Machnaut and Tiulei Laila and all this. That's another story. And then moved into the administration of the camp until I graduated law school. And then that summer I had to, after 7 years of college and law school, you have to finally learn how to be a lawyer. So you take the bar exam. Meant I had to be in the city. I came up to visit, but I had to be in the city that summer. And then 68, maybe 67, I was invited to be a member of the Vada Machaneh. And then a couple years later, a member of the National Ramah Commission. And then for the next 20 years, I was an active member of the camp committee, and then became ultimately, I don't remember now what year, 89, 90, something. I became the president of Ramah, Wisconsin, and the first thing I did was put in term limits. No one should wait 20 years. So I then continued as being president of the camp for, it turned out, I think 7 years, and then became president of the National Ramah Commission. See, and I did that for, again, I put in term limits, so did that for 4 years, and then I was out of work. It's a terrible problem. What am I going to do other than keep coming to meetings and things? Which is when I became involved in Mesorti Olami and Congress Hatzioni. I'd been already a delegate to World Zionist Congress. So then I became president of Mesorti Olami, and I learned that the Jewish world around the world, outside of North America, was incredibly complex. And then with that came all these other wonderful, time-consuming things like Hanhala of the World Zionist Organization and Board of Governors of the Sochnut. All of which I'm slowly trying to move away from. I've not move away, but for instance, we have a new president of the Mesorti Olami movement, a younger woman. She'll be delighted to hear that because she's probably only 10 years younger than I am. But the more important thing is that she is from the UK. She is from London. It's the first time that we've had a president of the world movement not from the U.S. Why mention this in this interview? Because what I've told chanichim here constantly, and tell counselors constantly, you don't know what the people you're with at camp are going to become 20, 30, 40 years later. And you are shaping their lives. And the counselors who shaped my life and my friend's life when we were 16 years old didn't have any idea that one of them would become a great scholar and rabbi and leader of the conservative movement. Another would become a president of Ramah, California, right? And another would become one of the world's greatest collectors of Jewish art, right? In addition to everything else, and who made Aliyah. You didn't know all those things, but you have a responsibility, if you're a Chaver Tzevet in Ramah, to understand that this is the world you're working in, and you've got to work with young people because you're going to influence what they become.
It's funny. I remember a couple of days ago it was sad in the Yeshivat Silberman.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sad about Kemper, whose name I will not mention, that I wish that I could be here and still figure out what an amazing person he is,
Mm-hmm.
what an amazing kid, he is, what an amazing person he will grow up to be. So, like when he'll figure out, and when he be able to see what we see in him, is something that I wish I could be here to see. I would like to take a minute and ask you about Mesolti Olamit.
Okay.
As an Israeli, the word Mesolti has a whole different meaning. What is Mesolti Olamit?
All right.
Like, I know that we don't have a lot of time, and it can be
No,
like an hour conversation.
Okay. Here's a very simple answer. The conservative movement is seen as a creation of the United States or North America. When the conservative movement first began to be in Israel, it had a label. These are people who are basically olim from the U.S. who still want to daven the way they davened in the U.S. Period. It's not for anybody else. Okay? Slowly, conservative Judaism spread, actually in the UK and in Latin America first, and then through Europe. So early on, with the Tnuah in Israel, actually, he said, we are not going to call ourselves conservativim, although there are still places. Talk to a Chaver Knesset who is, not a new Chaver Knesset, but they'll talk to you about conservativim and a couple other places. But we said, we need a new word, all right? So we took, from our sense of Masoret, we took Masorti, okay? That means, so the Tnuah in Israel is called Tnuah Masortit, okay? So now, as we expand, we had this thing called the World Council of Judaism. World Council of Synagogues, rather. So what is that? That's not communicating to anyone. And when I became president, or even before, we began to adopt, first of all, it should be in Hebrew. So, okay, it's the Masorti movement. Masorti Olami. So it covers the rest of the world. We have a dotted line relationship to Israel because they have really their own strong development. And we don't have literally anything to do with Kilot in the U.S. and Canada other than to ask them for money, which, thank God, they give us. But we have the rest of we have 180 kilot around the world, including places you'd be very surprised, like India. We get requests. We got a request recently for affiliation from Cambodia, from Phnom Penh. We have kilot. We have 70 kilot in South America. Unbelievable.
I would like to dedicate a whole show just to listen, or if you have time, without microphone, just to hear you talk about those random kiyot around the world that you would never imagine.
And you would learn right away that every kihila, almost every kihila, has its own minhag, and that some of them are, in the first instance, shocking to someone who comes, let's say, from the U.S. And then you begin to understand, for instance, that having 2 and 3 chazanim of different genders, and even on Shabbat, electronic music, but not always electronic, but music, uh, changes the nature of tefillah. And we see that here, of course, if you have that when it's not Shabbat, and you see how you can augment a sense of Kedusha by using music. They've figured that out in the South American idiom incredibly. Just one example.
Just another thought. The Eilim, we have many Prakim starts with Lemitzach Alavi Tip.
Right.
We have seen that before use music and prayer.
And
That's true correct.
and we had Beit HaMikdash. So the question really is, do we continue that? That's a big issue in conservative Judaism, and even just give you a parallel to this. So at the end of a wedding, and you broke the glass, and you would say Zecher LaMikdash, but I don't say that. Well, I didn't say that, and today I would say, and even at a wedding a couple of weeks ago, it's better to say Im Eshkachech Yerushalayim. Okay, so change, principled change, is something that is essential to conservative Judaism, and Ramah has been a hotbed for that because you have people coming from different kilot, and they have different minhagim, and they have to accommodate each other and understand that there is no one frozen way.
We talked about the random kehilot around the world, and once you come from Israel, comes to the river. So me personally, 31 hours
Mm-hmm.
since the minute I left home till I stepped into camp. Talked about it before the interview. The Shabbat B'Nimi Kulam. We always end up here.
Yeah. Because it's had, there have been 2 great influences in my life, other than my parents. First, Ramah. The other was Professor Chaim Tadmor, because I studied Tanakh from him when I was 16. But we studied Tanakh with Tanakh in Hebrew, with Revised Standard Version in English, King James Version in English, other things, and he would flip back and forth. How do we understand this pasuk? Well, look at this pasuk. Look how it's translated from the Latin. And it expanded the way in which you think of things. Okay, that's what we're all about in terms of Ramah, in terms of Jewish education, is to set up a framework that will focus the way you think, live. You won't all make the same decisions. Not everyone is Shomer Mitzvot, or if they are Shomer Mitzvot in different contexts. But there's a process by which you think through this. This is what we're all about.
One might think that people who decide to come to a place like this have they all come from the same place, or all kind of same mind or same principles, and then you come here and you figure out how different everyone's approach is.
Correct. And remember, just in the United States environment, not everyone lives in Chicago or Minneapolis or even St. Louis, all right? And Jews live throughout the world, throughout the United States, and the interaction of a conservative Jew in Des Moines or in other cities is quite different. And you need to get all that together. And by the way, there was a Jewish community in Eagle River. People don't know about. People don't know that Eagle Waters, Maury's Eagle Waters, as it was called before, was founded by a guy by the name of Maury Holtzman, who was known as the Little Jew from Eagle River. His phone number was Eagle River 1, by the way. Ours was Eagle River 424. His was Eagle River 1. There was a super value here, Holprin's super value. Holprin, by the time we get to the late 50s, Holprin family were no longer Jewish, but their parents and grandparents were Jewish, and they still carried kosher delicatessen, sealed kosher delicatessen in the store. We took Madrichin Tzirim once out to Hurley, Wisconsin, Ironwood, Michigan, Hurley, Wisconsin for Yom Chofesh, and stopped at a store to get, potato chips or something. The guy says to me, the owner says, "I've got some corned beef. It's kosher." I said, "No." He says, "No, I have a separate knife I use only for the corned beef." Then no, thank you. But there were Jewish communities throughout these areas and other areas, and they developed in different ways. Bert Cohn, who was the director of Ramah back, used to do a gig on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur in the Kehillah in Warsaw. And in the Warsaw family, in Warsaw was the Gorwitz family, who I later had contact with, but they had a relative in Green Bay who donated the tzrif that's all over by the lake. I don't know what we call that tzrif now, and we fixed it up a lot now. But there's a whole world out there.
Things you will never imagine. It's amazing how every piece of information you get kind of opens up this whole new world that we don't know anything about. It is one of the reasons I came back to camp for a second year. I know that I've learned so much in my first year that I haven't learned anything. That there's so much more for me to learn.
Right.
People say, like, we come to bring our culture, to bring our beliefs, but we can benefit so much more than that.
Yeah. And you learn every day something.
Yeah. On that note, תודה רבה.
בבקשה, and
אני רוצה לאחל לך גם ביוונית, אני לא יודע ואתה כן.
אני יודע יוונית, אני יודע רק משפט אחד, תינפטופוטובני אקפי, which essentially means, loosely translated, what is this thing called love? It's very good with young women. It was.
Well, all comes back to that in the end.
Yeah.
אז מעולה. תודה רבה.
טוב, נהניתי.
תודה.